this is the best investment in the world today, is called silver.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because I study history a lot. This here is fake money. I would never work for this stuff. It's good as toilet paper. So the biggest investment today is this. This is 35 US. And I think everybody in the world can afford this today. And I tell people every day, you should buy this. No, I'll save this. You see, they don't know the difference between this is fake money, this is real money. And this here is gold. Real money, fake money. So the yen, the rupee, the dollar, the peso, all fake.
What if I told you that right now, beneath the noise of politics and the endless headlines, a quiet financial revolution is underway? A revolution that could determine not just the future of Wall Street, but the stability of every American household. Gold and silver are exploding to levels we have never seen before, and it's not by accident. It is the result of decades of reckless borrowing, endless money printing, and the slow erosion of trust in the US dollar. Robert Kiyosaki, the man who has spent years warning Americans about the dangers of fiat money, is not just saying, "I told you so." He's saying the real crash hasn't even begun yet, and if you don't prepare now, you may not have a second chance. He calls the dollar fake money, and he insists that only those who hold real assets, gold, silver, and to some extent Bitcoin, will survive the storm.
Most people, they're going to get wiped out because they went to frickin' school and they listened to Marxists telling them that paying taxes is good and you should get out of debt because debt is bad. These guys are taking our freedom away by being stupid. And the way they get stupid people is they send them to school where they learn nothing about this. And those are the guys that call me a crook. I'm going, wait a minute, I'm not paying taxes. Remember what Hillary Clinton and Trump were on the debate in 2016, and Hillary said, yeah, Donald Trump doesn't pay taxes. He says, that means I'm smart. You know, he doesn't pay taxes. I said, he is smart.
The question for every American today is simple. Will you be holding paper promises when the next crisis hits, or will you be holding real money that governments can't print out of thin air? Look at what has happened already this year. Gold has smashed through the $3,500 barrier, hitting record highs and sending shockwaves through financial markets. For perspective, gold was under $2,000 not long ago. This surge is not the product of hype. It's the clearest signal that investors around the world are losing confidence in the dollar. At the same time, silver, long dismissed as gold's weaker cousin, has staged one of the strongest rallies in modern history, breaking above $40 an ounce and outperforming stocks, bonds, and even Bitcoin. In just a few months, silver has done what few assets can. It has proven both its role as a safe haven and its growing importance in the modern industrial economy. For the first time in decades, both gold and silver are screaming the same message. The global financial system is in trouble, and Americans cannot afford to ignore it. Robert Kiyosaki has been warning about this moment for years. When he first started calling the dollar fake money after President Nixon ended the gold standard in 1971, many laughed. But look where we are today. The United States is $36 trillion in debt, and that number is growing by nearly $1 trillion every single quarter. In the last 2 months alone, Washington borrowed over $1 trillion, roughly $500 billion every 30 days. No family could survive spending like that. If you ran your household budget this way, the bank would seize your home and you'd be bankrupt. Yet America does it, and the world continues to finance it, until recently. Now, China, Japan, and even longtime allies are quietly dumping U.S. treasuries and buying gold. Central banks from Beijing to Moscow are stocking up on bullion while cutting back on dollars. This is exactly the de-dollarization wave Kiyosaki warned about. He said, when the rest of the world starts turning away from the dollar, the American middle class will pay the price in higher inflation, higher interest rates, and a collapsing standard of living. So, why gold and silver? Why not just hold cash and wait for the storm to pass? The truth is, cash itself is the problem. Every time the Federal Reserve prints another round of stimulus, every time Congress signs off on more debt, your dollars lose value. Inflation doesn't just show up at the grocery store. It shows up in your savings account, your retirement fund, your ability to buy a home. Gold, on the other hand, is timeless. For thousands of years, civilizations have turned to it when paper promises failed. When currencies collapsed, gold always preserved wealth. That's why it is soaring now. But silver, Kiyosaki argues, is even more urgent today. Unlike gold, silver is not only a store of value, but also an industrial necessity. It is essential for solar panels, electric vehicles, medical equipment, and high-tech electronics. As the world pushes into renewable energy and electrification, demand for silver is exploding while supply remains tight. Mines are struggling to keep up, and geopolitical risks in producing countries make the outlook even more constrained. This is why Kiyosaki calls silver the most asymmetric bet of our lifetime. He believes silver could triple in price in the near term, and he has openly told Americans to buy it before the surge becomes undeniable. But let's be clear, this isn't just about making a profit. For American families, this is about survival. Think about your savings. If you have $10,000 in the bank, how much can it really buy compared to 3 years ago? Inflation has already destroyed nearly 20% of that purchasing power. Think about retirement accounts that are heavily tied to the stock market. What happens when markets finally reflect the reality of unsustainable U.S. debt? Think about the bond market, once considered the safest place to park money. Yields are rising, prices are falling, and foreign buyers are walking away. Where does that leave the average American? It leaves them exposed, vulnerable, and dependent on promises from a government drowning in debt. Gold and silver offer something different. They are assets outside the system. They don't rely on Washington's promises, and they don't collapse when the Fed miscalculates. They simply hold value, and in times like these, that value can be the difference between surviving the storm and losing everything. Of course, the critics argue that Kiyosaki has been sounding alarms for years. They point out that he often predicts crashes, and sometimes the timing is off. But the truth is, his message hasn't changed because the fundamentals haven't changed. America is still spending far more than it earns. The national debt is still exploding. The dollar is still weakening as countries like China, Russia, and even Brazil shift trade into local currencies and buy more gold. And the American middle class is still losing ground. The fact that gold has surged to record highs and silver has delivered its strongest rally in years proves that Kiyosaki's warnings are no longer just theory. They're visible in real time. Now imagine where this goes next. Gold at $3,500 may feel high, but adjusted for inflation, it hasn't even reached the peaks of the 1980s. Silver at $40 may seem like it has already run up. But in 2011, it nearly hit $50, and that was without today's massive industrial demand. Kiyosaki believes these metals could go far higher. $5,000 gold and $100 silver are no longer unrealistic scenarios if the U.S. continues down this path. Every trillion added to the debt, every dollar printed out of thin air, every foreign buyer that turns away from treasuries brings us closer to that outcome. And when it happens, those who dismissed precious metals will find themselves trapped in a collapsing system, while those who prepared will finally understand what real wealth protection looks like. But let's also acknowledge the risks. Silver is volatile. It can jump 15% in a month and fall just as fast. Gold, too, can correct sharply after big rallies. Even Kiyosaki warns that bubbles eventually burst, and he prepares by keeping cash ready to buy more when markets dip. His approach is not about gambling everything on one outcome. It's about recognizing that the dollar is a rigged game designed to lose value over time, and hedging against that with assets that Washington cannot manipulate. That's why he focuses on a combination of silver for immediate upside, gold for long-term stability, and Bitcoin as a speculative hedge against the entire financial system. So, where does that leave us as Americans in 2025? It leaves us at a crossroads. Do we continue trusting a system drowning in $36 trillion of debt, hoping politicians will suddenly become responsible? Or do we take matters into our own hands and secure part of our future in assets that have outlasted every empire in history? Robert Kiyosaki would argue that the answer is obvious. He says the middle class is being destroyed not by accidents, but by design. Inflation is not a mistake, it's a policy. Debt is not an oversight, it's a strategy. And the only way out is to stop playing the game with fake money and start protecting yourself with real money. That's what gold and silver represent today. Not speculation, not hype, survival. And here's the geopolitical question every American should be asking. What happens if the dollar is no longer the world's reserve currency? The answer is sobering. If global trade shifts away from dollars, demand for treasuries collapses. If demand for treasuries collapses, interest rates in America spike. If interest rates spike, everything from mortgages to car loans to credit card debt becomes unpayable. The U.S. government itself would face higher borrowing costs, forcing even more money printing to cover the gap. That cycle leads to hyperinflation, a destroyed middle class, and a weakened America on the global stage. This is not science fiction. It's already happening in slow motion as BRICS nations move to settle trade in local currencies and stockpile gold instead of dollars. The world is preparing for a post-dollar system, and Americans cannot afford to pretend otherwise. Which brings us to the final point. Robert Kiyosaki doesn't shout about gold and silver because he wants to scare you. He does it because he knows history. Every empire that drowned in debt eventually lost its currency. Every generation that trusted politicians with their savings eventually regretted it. And every crisis created two groups, those who lost everything and those who prepared. Right now, the choice is yours. The storm is not coming. It's already here. Gold and silver are not soaring because the world feels confident. They are soaring because the world is preparing for collapse. The only question that matters is, are you? Because when the dust settles, only those who held real money will still have wealth to pass on. And so, as we stand at this historic turning point, remember this: when the dollar fails, when Washington's promises break, when the debt can no longer be ignored, gold and silver will still be here. They have outlasted kings, empires, wars, and revolutions. They will outlast this too. The decision each of us faces is whether to ride into that future-holding paper that loses value every day or real assets that no government can destroy. Robert Kiyosaki has made his choice clear. The question is, what will you choose?